You know, after riding the Melee for 500 miles, I'm really glad that ENVE didn't just build another Tarmac SL7 because that would have been very predictable and very boring. And while these two bikes may look very similar on paper, the Melee has a ride that is undeniably playful and lively. Let's talk about the Tarmac SL7 versus the ENVE Melee. I've done in-depth videos on both of these bikes that I'll link in the description below. To keep it brief, the Tarmac SL7 is a full 11-speed derace build with a set of Roval CLX 64s with 32mm tubeless Grand Prix 5000 tires, and the Melee is a full SRAM Red build with a set of ENVE 45 ARs and 30mm Eagle F1 tubeless tires. The Tarmac SL7 comes in at a weight of 16.5 pounds, and the Melee comes in a half pound heavier at 17 pounds. For comparison purposes, I threw on a set of 4.5s onto the Tarmac to see if it would change my opinion. Did not change my opinion one bit. There are inevitably variables between these two bikes. And despite what you might think, I do not have a wind tunnel. I may have a forklift, but I don't have a wind tunnel. I'm also not gonna bore you with boring power data in hopes of drawing some kind of conclusion based on numbers. My goal here is to give you a real world opinion on these two bikes based on riding them for a significant amount of time. I've ridden the Tarmac 9,000 miles and I've ridden the Melee 500 miles. Far enough to know how these bikes perform and where their strengths and weaknesses are. I'm a simple bike guy and I think the Melee is a beautiful bike. The Damascus gray color looks good on a computer, it looks great in person. I like that the styling is subtle, clean, and simple. The only thing I'm a little bit on the fence about is the tall head tube that creates a sloping top tube. Other than that, I think it's a great looking bike. That's not to say that the SL7 is not a good looking bike, but it's about 2 years old now and I feel like it's just a little bit dated. When it comes to climbing, I think the SL7 is just a little bit quicker and snappier on the hills. The power transfer is seamless and the acceleration is very, very quick. When you hop out of the saddle, the bike just goes as quickly as you want it to. Whereas with the Melee, I sensed a hair of hesitation when I tried to accelerate or climb, which is surprising because as a whole, the Melee feels stiffer than the SL7. The handling on both of these bikes is exceptional, especially at high speeds, but they handle quite differently. The SL7 feels very well mannered and the handling is incredibly refined. The Melee, on the other hand, is more playful and it feels sharper, yet it requires a little bit more input and it is less forgiving. They're both fantastic when it comes to handling, they just perform differently. When it comes to the flats and just maintaining speed, the best way that I could describe the SL7 is simply efficient. It almost feels effortless at times, like it's just cutting through the wind. The Melee, on the other hand, just took a little bit more effort. It's my belief that riding bikes for long distances can become much more comfortable with a proper bike fit. I also understand that what's comfortable to me may not be comfortable to you and vice versa. I would consider both of these bikes comfortable within the understanding that they are both high-end race bikes and they are very stiff. The longest ride that I've done on the Tarmac is just a little bit over 200 miles, and the longest ride that I've done on the Melee is just about 100 miles. From a comfort perspective, I would have no hesitation taking the Melee on a 200-mile ride in the same way that I have no hesitations about taking the Tarmac on a 200-mile ride. I think they're both comfortable. With the ability to mount 35mm or larger tires, the Melee becomes a very versatile bike. Throw a set of Continental Terra speeds in 35s or a set of Gravel King SS's in 35mm, and now all of a sudden you have a very versatile, almost a do-it-all road bike for crushing kind of that level 1 and level 2 gravel while still going out and smashing the pedals with friends on road group rides. Both of these frames come in at $5,500. The advantage with the Melee is that for $5,500, you get not just a frame, seat post, and stem, but you also get bars as well, adding a little bit of value to the Melee. When you're selecting your ENVE bars, you want to take a close look at the measurements, especially if you're someone who rides in the drops a lot. There's a flare on the ENVE bars that's typically not found on other bars, and you'll just want to take note of it. These are both exceptional bikes. The Melee, in many ways, reminds me of a mix between my old Venge and the SL7. In fact, I've often thought that the Melee might be what the Venge would have been had Specialized continued with that bike. It's stiff, it's responsive, it's playful, it's nimble, it's really, really exciting to ride, and it always keeps you on your toes. The Melee is probably the most exciting bike that I have ridden in the last 2 years. For me, the efficiency and handling on the SL7 are second to none. After 9,000 miles on that bike, it's basically second nature at this point. I understand the output of every single input that I give it, and it just continues to perform flawlessly every single time. Doesn't matter that it has an older 11-speed group set with over 10,000 miles on it. Doesn't matter that the wheel set is 2 generations old. The tarmac keeps going and going and going, and I know that bike so well now. When I compare these two bikes, I think it boils down to this. If you like a stiffer, more lively, and more playful bike, go for the Melee. If you want a bike that has a larger tire clearance so you can fit light gravel tires on it and go crush some level 1 and level 2 gravel, go for the Melee. If you want something slightly more refined and well-mannered, the SL7 is a safe bet. And while the SL7 may be my trusty old steed, I can tell you that it's the Melee that gets me excited to get out and ride in the mornings. It's almost like that Christmas Eve feeling all over again. And if I had to choose just one, based on my riding style and based on my current bike quiver, which consists of an Epic, a Crux, and an SL7, I would probably just hang on to the SL7. That's not meant to be a knock on the Melee. There's just a level of familiarity, comfort, and trust that I've learned to appreciate with the SL7. And I think everyone here can understand that. There are just some bikes that work for us, and the SL7 is that bike for me. However, if I was in the market for a new bike, or I wasn't content with the SL7, or I simply missed that feeling of excitement that the Venge had to offer, I would put the Melee at the top of my list, and I would demo one as soon as possible. The Melee is an absolute blast. For now, I'm keeping both the SL7 and the Melee. In fact, as soon as I'm done with this comparison, I'm gonna throw 35mm tires onto the Melee and really start testing it as the do-it-all bike, or at least a very light gravel bike, and just see what it's capable of. I had quite a few requests to also do a Melee versus Athos video. If you'd like to see anything else, drop a comment below or shoot me a message on Instagram. Also, I've got an Athos frame for sale, so if you're interested in that, let me know. Until next time.
Now that was fun.